Today I'm down in Southern California taking a look at the new 4th generation Honda Pilot. For 2023, Honda says this is the most rugged, most capable, most chiseled, and yes, the biggest Pilot ever built. In this video, we're going to be exploring the top-end Elite trim together. If you want to know more about the Trail Sport, that's the most rugged version of the Pilot, that's going to be in a separate video. The Trail Sport gets a slightly tweaked appearance, about an inch extra ground clearance, skid plates underneath, and much more capable tires. It's the first Honda Pilot ever to be delivered from the factory with all-terrain tires. The Elite trim is, of course, the top-end luxury trim of the Pilot. We get full LED headlights in all trims with LED turn signals as well. Definitely a change on the Honda styling that we've seen in the previous generation Pilot. This is definitely boxier, more upright, more rugged in all trims, not just the Trail Sport model. And down here at the bottom we have LED fog lights. How much bigger is it than the outgoing model? Well, it's a pretty decent growth. About 3 inches in overall length, nearly 3 inches in wheelbase stretch, and most of that growth goes right back here to the cargo area and the rear passenger area. At this point, we don't have complete specifications available just yet for the 23 Pilot, so I cannot say whether combined legroom figures and headroom figures are class leading, but this is at the very least very, very roomy on the inside. And if you want something bigger on the inside than this, you're really taking a look at a full-size SUV, something like a Tahoe or a Suburban. It is, however, possible that in terms of combined legroom, the Korean twins may actually still be beating the Pilot because those are incredibly roomy on the inside. You can tell that the look of the Pilot has definitely gone back to its rugged origins. We have perhaps a bit of Xterra meets 4Runner styling going on right back here for the third row window, and definitely a boxier profile with that really horizontal hood, definitely a longer front end, especially the styling of the front end than we found in the last generation Pilot. Moving all the way around to the rear, we find a relatively practical, very vertical hatchback here, not some sort of raked forward hatch like we find in some of the competition. That's certainly going to make this more cargo practical in the real world. The taillights are definitely a styling departure from the last generation. Instead of that C shape, we find more of a bar kind of appearance here. These are combination tail lamps, however, not full LEDs. Even in this top-end trim, the turn signal remains an incandescent element. We have Pilot spelled out nice and large across the rear with this black bar that combines one tail lamp with the other. Still have a bright Honda logo though, and still have the bright Elite trim there. At the bottom of the bumper, we have 2 faux exhaust tips. They've really taken a page out of Audi's playbook. Nothing comes out of these tips. That's actually a completely sealed pocket just with that chrome ring. The real exhaust, that's tucked up under the bumper. If you were concerned that Honda would follow Toyota's lead and replace the V6 engine with a turbocharged 4-cylinder, fear not, we still have a V6 under this hood. But it's not the V6 out of the old Pilot. It's an all-new V6, now producing 285 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque from the same 3.5 liters. As before, this features cylinder deactivation to help improve fuel economy, but I don't have fuel economy figures for this model just yet. The engine is mated to a new 10-speed automatic transmission, basically borrowed out of other Honda and Acura products. It's likely going to be a lot less controversial than the 9-speed we found in last year's model. If we're talking top-end trims, all-wheel drive is standard on the Elite. It's also standard on the Trail Sport, just as you'd expect out of that rugged model. It's optional on the remaining trims. Obviously, fuel economy is going to be the highest in the front-wheel drive model. Capability and fun-to-driveness is going to be highest in the all-wheel drive model, because this has Honda's latest IVTM all-wheel drive system. What's unique about Honda's all-wheel drive system, also known as super handling all-wheel drive in the Acura lineup, is the ability for it to overdrive the rear axle. That means that this is one of the few vehicles in this segment that can have a rear power bias when the front wheels are not slipping. If you're in, say, a GMC Acadia or a Traverse or something along those lines, the majority of the power is happening on the front axle all the time. Unless the front wheels slip, then it can send up to 50% of power to the rear axle. Not so with this case. Also, we have a torque vectoring rear axle that can offer limited locking functionality, torque vectoring capability, and limited slip functionality, something that's pretty rare in this segment. The difference is really noticeable power on in IVTM4 equipped vehicles. You'll notice that if you're driving a winding mountain road really aggressively and you really push hard on that throttle, you can get just a tiny bit of rear end rotation, something that you don't find in the all-wheel drive competition. Obviously, I haven't been able to spend all day in the Pilot, but these seats are likely to be as comfortable or more comfortable than the outgoing model. One thing that did surprise me, however, we just have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support on the driver's seat, even in this Elite trim. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion, but the front passenger seat does not have the same range of motion as the driver's seat. If you're looking for higher end features like an extending thigh cushion, massage, things like that, you're going to find that in the competition, or of course in the more luxury oriented models from Honda, namely the Acura MDX. That's going to have all of those bells and whistles that you might want to be looking at as far as an upgrade above the Pilot Elite. As I've come to expect from the Pilot, jumping back into the second row, there is tons and tons of room. Headroom, we have about 2 inches of headroom left for me at 6 feet tall. Even though this model has a large panoramic moonroof, I have lots and lots of legroom left here as well. But perhaps the most interesting feature about the top end Elite trim is this thing right here. It is a removable center seat for the second row. That's right, the Elite still has 8-passenger capability. This is, I think, the only model in this segment where the top end trim comes with 8 seats and 8 seat belts. So if you have a family of 4 or 5 or 6 and you want to be able to carry the occasional passenger with you, this is going to be an excellent option. You can remove it, have effectively captain's chairs in the second row, or you can have it in place and seat 8. Or of course, put a child seat in the middle, and once your kid's out of child seats, you can just take it out and put it somewhere else. Now, the important thing to know about the removable seat in the second row is that you'll only find it in the top 2 trims of Pilot. If you get the Trail Sport, it's going to be 7-passenger only. Nothing is going on right here in the middle. And if you get the EXL trim, you'll be able to choose between 7-passenger or 8-passenger functionality. But as with the other 8-passenger versions of the Pilot, the second row does not have the removable second row section. If you get those lower end trims and 8 passengers, it's just a regular 60/40 bench. Perhaps the most interesting thing about the removable second row seat in the Pilot is that Honda actually gives you somewhere to put it rather than simply your garage. The cargo area back here has a well specifically designed for this seat to fit in. And then they've given us this little yellow strap so that you can latch it down and keep it from running away. Honda then gives us a removable lid to that storage area. You can choose either carpet surface or a plastic surface if you don't want to get things muddy. And in case you're wondering, yes, there is still a spare tire. It's completely under the vehicle. Hopping into the way back is pretty easy with these power folding and sliding second row seats. And the third row seats are no longer the domain for naughty children and your mother-in-law. There's plenty of room back here. Most of the growth apparently on the inside has gone to third row legroom, although again, we don't have all the details just yet. But that does mean that I can move this second row seat back into a position that's pretty comfortable for me at 6 feet tall. I still have about 2 inches of legroom left. Now, if this second row seat was all the way back in its tracks, then my knees are touching the seat, but you have the ability to move that seat forward, still have plenty of room, and I was able to sit comfortably up front and in the second row and in the third row. Now, headroom, that is a bit of a different matter. If I try and lean back here towards the headrest, my head does touch the ceiling, specifically this center seatbelt module, which is right above my head over here on the passenger side. You do get a little bit more room on the driver's side of the third row, but keep in mind, this is still a tight third row. It has 3 seats across the back, and the width of this is really not that much wider than a lot of the competition that only offers 2 seats in the rear. So if you put 2 people back here in the way back, it's going to be just about as comfortable as most of the competition. If you try and squeeze 3 people across the rear, they might be a little bit tight. Another thing to keep in mind is that these second row seats do not move in a manner where you can keep a child seat latch anchored into place, because this seat back cushion has to collapse forward first, then the second row seats can slide. So you can't leave the child seat or the booster seat latch anchored into that spot and then tilt and slide that seat forward unless your booster is pretty low profile where the seat back cushion can still collapse forward. However, it does appear that there is more room behind the second row seat and this door opening here, so some smaller folks might be able to squeak through there with the second row seat simply slid all the way forward. Honda gives the third row floor mat pretty decent coverage of the floor. I really appreciate this little cut-in right here for the third row center seat position, so that way they get a little bit more legroom right there under the center seat in the second row. Now, if I slide that seat forward, that's what the base looks like for mounting that seat in position. You can see those 4 anchor points there. We also have that little tread area there for climbing from the front to the back, but nothing covers those little hoops when that seat is removed. Now let's take a quick spin around the interior. Here we have a large panoramic moonroof over the front and second rows with a power shade. We also have manual shades for the second row seats, really a nice touch there. Height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger. This model has leather upholstery with lots of additional piping and stitching to help dress things up, and perforations in the center sections because these seats are both heated and ventilated. As you'd expect in a Honda, we have a very practical interior with lots of storage cubbies, bottle holders, things like that going on the front doors. Lots of soft touch materials going on here as well. Kind of a geometric pattern to that trim on the doors. The Trail Sport has piano black trim everywhere, but this one gets trim with a little bit of extra architectural detail. Moving on over to the dashboard, if you've taken a look at some of the photos on the dashboard and you were worried that this was a piano black section, fear not, this is actually a large storage cubby. It looks black because it actually is quite large. You can fit some of the largest smartphones right there inside that cubby area. We have a soft touch section below with stitching, and then a pretty decently sized bin-style glove compartment at the bottom, soft touch materials on the upper section of the dashboard. But moving to the center of the dash, we oddly enough find a somewhat small LCD for a top-end trim in this segment these days. This is a 9-inch LCD, base versions get a 7-inch LCD. This is actually quite small compared to the new Telluride and the Palisade, or of course the Highlander. All of those have 12.3-inch LCDs. Not all of them in the base trim, but the top-end trim of all of those will have that large 12.3-inch display. Moving below that, we find large air vents, the engine start-stop button, the controls for the 3-zone automatic climate control, including a lock mode for the rear climate. Down below that, we have USB-A and USB-C ports, kind of a small little pocket right there for your Motorola flip phone. And then if you have a modern 21st century phone, it'd go down here on the Qi wireless charging mat. We have Honda's Hunt and Peck style shifter down here, drive mode selector, 2 big cup holders, and then a big padded center armrest with a pretty decently sized storage area underneath it. And then below that, a full LCD instrument cluster with a style that's a little bit different than we find in the other Hondas with this approximately 10-inch LCD. This is also a little bit small for this segment. Most of the competition with full LCDs, they're around 12 inches or so. You can see that some of the gauges are LEDs, so like the engine temperature and the fuel level, those are not part of the liquid crystal in the middle. Moving out from there, we have a 3-spoke steering wheel. Heated steering wheel button right down there at the bottom, paddle shifters on the back. You'll find infotainment controls over on this side, and controls for the standard adaptive cruise control over on that side. If you're interested in getting your hands on the new Honda Pilot, now is the time to head on down to your Honda dealer and get on the list, because these should be on sale later in 2022. The price tag, that's anyone's guess at the moment, but the current generation Pilot started at $38,080, and the top-end Elite trim came in at $50,370. You can bet that it's going to be a little bit more expensive for 2023 because we have more on the new 2023 Pilot than we did before. Exactly how much more expensive it's going to be, we don't really know yet, but I would expect at least $1,000 to $1,500, although it's entirely possible that Honda could pull a rabbit out of their hat and match last year's pricing. Again, at this point, it's anybody's guess. Also, anybody's guess is exactly how this is going to stack up against the competition. This is likely going to be one of the most dynamic and one of the most capable entries in this segment. Also likely one of the most reliable if Honda's track record is anything to go by. It also has some really family practical features on the inside. I love the fact that the Elite trim has 8-passenger seating capability, because for some reason, nobody else does this. With every other manufacturer out there, if you work your way all the way up to the top end trim, you have to get captain's chairs in the second row. And if you want a child seat in the middle rather than captain's chairs, that's simply not an option, or you have to work your way all the way down the trim ladder to perhaps some base trims in order to get that 8th seat back. For instance, if we take a look at the Kia Telluride, it's really just the base models that are 8-passenger. Everything else in the lineup is 7 passengers, and some of the competition will drop even all the way down to 6 passengers if you get the top-end trims. Not with the Honda Pilot Elite. Also, I really love the fact that Honda gives you somewhere to put that center seat. So when you take it out, you can put it in the back, you can put it somewhere else. The only thing missing, I think, would be some sort of snap-in center console, maybe for an armrest, or at least some sort of rubbery cover with cup holders there in the second row. Now, the one thing I can say at the moment is that the Pilot, even in Elite trim, has a bit of an LCD deficiency on the inside. We certainly see larger and more impressive LCDs in a lot of the competition. For instance, the Telluride has a dual 12.3-inch LCD infotainment setup going on there in the dashboard. We also find really big screens in the Highlander. Of course, if you wanted to go LCD wild, you could get yourself a Jeep Grand Cherokee, but it's going to be a lot more expensive than the Pilot. On the other hand, the Highlander and the Telluride and the Palisade, they are right in this same pricing range. Now again, at this point in time, I don't know exactly how much interior room we have going on inside the Pilot. It does have a very, very large capacity in terms of cubic feet from the back of the front row all the way to the rear. It's over 100 cubic feet there. That is a very, very large area as far as cargo capacity. So this is probably going to be one of the roomiest in the segment, but exact details we just don't know yet. We do know that the cargo area in the back is just about as big as the Chevy Traverse, however. So if you want to seat 8 and you want to put a lot of bags in the rear, this is basically going to be your only option if you also want those upper end features. As always, for complete details, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned, because hopefully I'll be driving one of these before they actually go on sale a little bit later this year. Be sure and stay tuned over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for other news as it comes available, including perhaps additional specifications before I'm actually able to get one out on the road, so we know a little bit better about how this compares with the competition. In the meantime, again, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see all of you next week.